Have you ever noticed how some people seem to move through their 70s and 80s with a kind of quiet ease, while others, sometimes younger, appear weighed down by the years? It is a question that surfaces quietly, often in unguarded moments. And the answer is not simply genetics or luck, though both play their roles. What decades of observation across populations reveal is something far more subtle. The difference often lies not in grand interventions or medical breakthroughs, but in a constellation of daily choices and perspectives that most people never consciously examine. We tend to think of aging as something that happens to us, but what if the way we age is shaped, in large part, by how we live? What follows is not a list of rules or prescriptions. It is an exploration of what researchers and observers have noticed about those who navigate later years with vitality, and what that might mean for the rest of us. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. The long view. Understanding vitality across the decades. A calm opening. There is a question that surfaces quietly, often in the early morning hours or during moments of reflection. It is not dramatic or urgent, but it persists. What determines whether the later decades of life feel expansive or constricted? Why do some individuals in their 80s move through the world with curiosity and ease while others, far younger, seem diminished by the years? These questions have occupied thinkers across centuries, from physicians in ancient Greece to contemporary researchers studying the biology of aging. What emerges from this long inquiry is not a single answer, but a constellation of observations, patterns that appear consistently among those who age well, regardless of where or when they lived. This exploration considers those patterns. It draws on what has been observed across populations, what biology reveals about the aging process, and what common sense suggests about living in ways that support vitality over time. The goal is not to offer prescriptions, but to illuminate possibilities, to consider what might be within reach for those who approach the later years with intention and understanding. Part 1. What aging actually is. The biology of time. To understand what supports vitality in later years, it helps to consider what aging actually represents at the biological level. Aging is not a disease to be cured, but a process to be understood. A gradual change in how cells function, how tissues maintain themselves, and how systems within the body communicate. Over time, cells accumulate minor damage. This is not a flaw in design, but a consequence of being alive. Every time a cell divides, tiny errors can creep into the genetic material. Every time mitochondria produce energy for the cell, they generate byproducts that can affect surrounding structures. Every exposure to sunlight, every meal digested, every breath taken in less than pristine air, these all leave traces. The body has remarkable systems for repair. Enzymes constantly patrol DNA, correcting errors. Cells recycle damaged components through processes with names like autophagy. Immune cells clear away debris and dysfunctional cells. For decades, these maintenance systems keep pace with the damage. At some point, the balance shifts. Repair becomes less efficient. Damage accumulates faster than it can be addressed. This is not a sudden event, but a gradual process, unfolding differently in different tissues and different individuals. The rate at which this shift occurs is influenced by many factors, some beyond control and some very much within it. The variability of aging. One of the most striking observations about human aging is its variability. Walk through any community and you will see individuals of the same chronological age who appear to be living in different decades. One 75-year-old moves stiffly, speaks slowly, and seems to have withdrawn from engagement with the world. Another of the same age walks with purpose, converses with energy, and maintains active involvement in family and community life. This variability tells us something important. Chronological age is a rough measure at best. It counts years, but does not capture how those years have been lived, what accumulated effects they have produced, or what reserves remain. Two people born on the same day may have biological ages that differ by decades. Researchers attempt to measure this through various means, assessing things like telomere length, epigenetic patterns, inflammatory markers, and physical function. These measures correlate with chronological age, but do not perfectly match it. They reveal that the aging process can be accelerated by certain conditions or slowed by others. What can be influenced? Some factors influencing aging are fixed. Genetics play a role, though perhaps a smaller one than commonly assumed. Studies of long-lived families suggest that exceptional longevity, living past 95 or 100, has a hereditary component. But reaching the mid-80s in good health appears to be within reach for most people, regardless of genetic inheritance. Other factors are matters of circumstance, the environment one lives in, the quality of medical care available, the economic resources one can command. These matter significantly and are not equally distributed. But between these fixed and circumstantial factors lies a substantial domain of influence. How one lives day to day, the patterns of movement, rest, nourishment, engagement, and connection that constitute daily existence shape the aging process in ways both subtle and profound. These patterns are the focus of what follows. Part 2. Movement as foundation. The design for motion body. The human body was designed for motion. Every system, cardiovascular, musculoskeletal, nervous, metabolic, functions optimally when regularly challenged by physical activity. When movement decreases, these systems gradually become less capable. This is not a punishment, but an adaptation. The body conserves resources by maintaining only what is regularly used. Consider what happens when a person becomes sedentary for an extended period. Muscles, no longer challenged, begin to lose mass and strength, a process that can start within days of inactivity. Bones, no longer bearing weight, gradually become less dense. The heart, pumping against reduced demand, becomes slightly less efficient. Metabolic processes that require muscle activity to function optimally begin to slow. These changes are reversible to a degree, but they become more difficult to reverse the longer they persist. The body's adaptive capacity, its ability to respond to challenges, declines gradually with age, meaning that regaining lost function takes longer and requires more consistent effort. The concept of reserve. Health in later years can be understood in terms of reserve, the gap between what one can do and what one needs to do. A young person typically has enormous reserve. They could walk miles beyond what their daily life requires, lift many times what they need to carry, think through complex problems far beyond those they encounter. With age, reserve tends to diminish. The gap between capacity and requirement narrows. For someone who has maintained activity levels, the narrowing is gradual and may never become problematic. For someone who has become sedentary, the gap may become very small. A minor illness or injury can push required function above available capacity, creating a crisis. This is why seemingly healthy older adults can decline rapidly after a fall or hospitalization. Before the event, they were functioning adequately, but with minimal reserve. Every bit of capacity was needed for daily life. When the event temporarily reduced capacity further, they could not meet basic requirements. Recovery becomes difficult because the body, already functioning at its limits, has no reserve to draw upon during healing. Movement across the spectrum. Movement need not be vigorous to be valuable. The relationship between physical activity and health outcomes appears to be continuous. More movement is generally better, but any movement is better than none. The greatest benefits come from moving from complete sedentariness to some regular activity. For those who have been inactive, starting with walking is sensible. Walking requires no equipment, no training, No special setting. It can be done alone or with others. In any weather with appropriate clothing. For any duration that feels comfortable. The key is consistency, regular walking. Most days. At a pace that feels slightly challenging but sustainable. For those who can do more. Adding variety provides additional benefits. Activities that challenge balance reduce fall risk. Those that load bones through impact or resistance maintain bone density. Those that elevate heart rate support cardiovascular function. Those that require coordination engage the nervous system alongside muscles. Strength as protection. Loss of muscle mass and strength, a condition called sarcopenia when it becomes significant, is one of the most consequential changes of aging. Strength affects everything. The ability to rise from a chair, to carry groceries, to recover balance after a stumble, to lift a grandchild, to open a jar. Strength training specifically addresses this decline. It signals to the body that muscles are needed and should be maintained. It can be started at any age. Studies have shown strength gains in individuals in their 90s who began resistance training. The adaptations are slower than in youth, but still significant. Bodyweight exercises, squats, wall push-ups, step-ups provide a starting point. Resistance bands offer progressive challenge. Weights, if available and used safely, allow precise loading. The principle is consistent. Challenge muscles with something they cannot easily do. Rest to allow adaptation. Repeat. Movement and the nervous system. Physical activity affects more than muscles and bones. It stimulates the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that supports the survival of existing neurons and encourages the growth of new connections. This is one reason why physically active individuals tend to maintain cognitive function longer than sedentary peers. Movement also improves blood flow to the brain, delivering oxygen and glucose essential for neural function. It supports the glymphatic system, the brain's waste clearance mechanism, which operates more efficiently during certain states, including those promoted by physical activity. The coordination required by complex movement, dance, racket sports, agility training provides additional cognitive challenge. Learning new movement patterns engages brain regions involved in memory, attention, and motor planning. This combination of physical and cognitive demand may be particularly beneficial. Part 3. Metabolic balance. The energy management system. Metabolism is the process by which the body converts food into energy and uses that energy for everything it does. This system is remarkably adaptable. It can handle feast and famine, high demand and low demand, different fuel sources and different schedules. With age, metabolic flexibility often declines. The body becomes less efficient at switching between fuel sources, less responsive to signals about energy availability, less precise in its regulation of blood sugar. These changes are not inevitable, but they are common, particularly in populations where physical activity has declined and certain eating patterns have become standard. Blood sugar regulation. One of the most consequential metabolic changes with age involves blood sugar regulation. Cells become somewhat less responsive to insulin, the hormone that tells them to take up glucose from the bloodstream. The pancreas must work harder to produce enough insulin to keep blood sugar in check. When this system functions well, blood sugar remains relatively stable throughout the day. When it begins to falter, blood sugar swings become wider, rising higher after meals, sometimes dropping too low between them. These swings affect energy, mood, appetite, and over time, the health of blood vessels and nerves. Physical activity is the most effective way to improve blood sugar regulation. Contracting muscles take up glucose directly, without requiring insulin. This is why a walk after a meal can significantly reduce the blood sugar spike that would otherwise occur. Eating patterns also matter. Meals that combine carbohydrates with protein, fat, and fiber are absorbed more slowly, producing gentler rises in blood sugar. Spacing meals to allow blood sugar to return to baseline between eating episodes supports the system's recovery. The question of body composition. The ratio of muscle to fat changes with age for most people. Muscle mass tends to decline unless actively maintained. Fat mass tends to increase, and its distribution often shifts, more accumulating around internal organs rather than just beneath the skin. This visceral fat is metabolically active in ways that subcutaneous fat is not. It releases inflammatory signals that affect the entire body. It contributes to insulin resistance. It is associated with higher risk for various conditions. The focus, from a metabolic perspective, is less on weight than on composition. Maintaining muscle through strength training and adequate protein intake supports metabolic health regardless of what the scale shows. Reducing excess visceral fat through activity and appropriate eating patterns reduces inflammatory load. Hydration and metabolism. Water is essential for every metabolic process. It transports nutrients, carries away waste, enables chemical reactions, regulates temperature. With age, the sense of thirst often diminishes. Many older adults become mildly dehydrated without realizing it. This matters because even mild dehydration affects how the body functions. Blood becomes slightly thicker, making the heart work harder. Kidneys must concentrate urine more, increasing their workload. Cognitive function can be affected. Even small fluid deficits impair concentration and short-term memory. Simple practices address this. Having water available throughout the day, drinking with meals, consuming water-rich foods like fruits and vegetables, paying attention to urine color as a rough guide to hydration status. For those who have trouble drinking enough plain water, herbal teas or water with lemon provide alternatives. The emerging science of timing. Research increasingly suggests that when we eat matters alongside what we eat. The body operates on circadian rhythms that affect how it handles food at different times. Insulin sensitivity is typically higher earlier in the day, meaning the same meal eaten at breakfast produces a smaller blood sugar response than if eaten at dinner. Extended periods without food, what researchers call time-restricted eating, allow the body to enter a state where cellular repair processes are upregulated. During these fasting periods, cells clear out damaged components, recycle proteins, and perform maintenance that is difficult to accomplish when constantly processing incoming food. This does not necessarily mean extreme fasting regimens. Even a consistent pattern of eating within a 12-hour window and fasting for 12 hours, say 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., provides a daily period for cellular maintenance. Shortening that window further may offer additional benefits for some individuals, though the evidence is still developing. Part 4. The nervous system and cognitive vitality. The plastic brain. For much of medical history, the adult brain was viewed as fixed, neurons were lost over time, and could not be replaced. Cognitive decline was inevitable. Research over recent decades has fundamentally changed this understanding. The brain remains plastic throughout life. It can form new connections between neurons. It can strengthen frequently used pathways. In some regions, it can even generate new neurons, a process called neurogenesis. These capacities diminish with age but do not disappear entirely. What drives this plasticity is use. Neurons that fire together wire together. Connections that are regularly activated become stronger. Those that are rarely used may be pruned away. The brain, like other organs, allocates resources to what is regularly demanded. Cognitive reserve. The concept of cognitive reserve helps explain why some individuals maintain function despite brain changes that would impair others. Reserve is built through a lifetime of intellectual engagement, education, complex work, and stimulating leisure activities. It represents the brain's ability to compensate, to find alternative pathways when primary ones are damaged. Individuals with high cognitive reserve can tolerate more brain pathology before showing symptoms. Two people may have identical amounts of Alzheimer's-related changes in their brains, but one functions normally while the other shows significant impairment. The difference is reserve. Building reserve is a lifelong process, but it can be enhanced at any age. Learning new skills, particularly those that are complex and unfamiliar, stimulates the brain in ways that routine activities do not. This is why a retired accountant who takes up painting, or a former teacher who learns a musical instrument, may experience cognitive benefits beyond mere enjoyment. Novelty and challenge. The brain responds most strongly to novelty, to experiences that do not fit existing patterns. When encountering something familiar, the brain uses well-established pathways efficiently. When encountering something new, it must forge new connections, recruit additional regions, and work harder to process the information. This is why passively consuming familiar content, watching the same types of television programs, reading the same genres, having the same conversations, provides limited cognitive stimulation. The brain is operating on autopilot, using established pathways without challenge. Novelty can be introduced in many ways. Learning a new language, traveling to unfamiliar places, taking up a craft or hobby requiring new skills, reading books on unfamiliar subjects, having conversations with people whose perspectives differ from one's own. The key is that the activity requires mental effort. It cannot be done automatically. The social brain. Social engagement engages the brain in complex ways. Conversation requires tracking multiple threads, interpreting tone and expression, recalling relevant information, formulating responses. Group activities require coordination and cooperation. Even observing others provides social learning. This may be why socially connected individuals tend to maintain cognitive function longer than isolated peers. The brain is being regularly exercised in ways that are inherently complex and unpredictable. Every social interaction is slightly different, requiring adaptation and learning. Social engagement also provides emotional benefits that affect brain health. Loneliness is stressful, and chronic stress damages the brain, particularly the hippocampus, a region central to memory. Social connection buffers stress, reducing its impact. Sleep and brain maintenance. The brain accomplishes essential maintenance during sleep. The glymphatic system, the brain's waste clearance mechanism, becomes highly active during deep sleep, flushing out metabolic byproducts that accumulate during waking hours. Among these is beta-amyloid, a protein that forms the plaques characteristic of Alzheimer's disease. Sleep also consolidates memories, transferring information from short-term to long-term storage. During certain sleep stages, the brain replays experiences from the day, strengthening the neural connections that represent those memories. With age, sleep patterns often change. Deep sleep decreases. Nighttime awakenings become more common. Total sleep time may decline. These changes are partly related to aging itself, but are also influenced by factors that can be modified. Light exposure, evening routines, caffeine and alcohol consumption, physical activity levels, and sleep environment. Protecting sleep means protecting brain health. Consistent bedtimes and wake times, adequate light exposure during the day, limited screen time before bed, a cool and dark sleeping environment, and attention to substances that disrupt sleep all support the maintenance that occurs during rest. Part 5. Nutrition as nourishment. The shifting nutritional landscape. Nutritional needs change with age, though not as dramatically as often assumed. The body requires the same essential nutrients throughout life, but the efficiency with which it extracts and utilizes those nutrients may decline. Protein needs relative to body weight. actually increase slightly in later years. The body becomes somewhat less efficient at using dietary protein for muscle maintenance, meaning more is needed to achieve the same effect. This is particularly important for those engaged in strength training, where adequate protein supports the adaptation to exercise. Calorie needs typically decline. Muscle mass, which burns more calories at rest than fat tissue, often decreases. Physical activity levels may drop. The result is that the same food intake that maintained weight at 50 may lead to gradual weight gain at 70, unless activity is maintained or intake adjusted. Nutrient density, with lower calorie needs but stable or increased nutrient requirements. The density of nutrients in food becomes more important. Every calorie consumed must deliver more nutritional value. There is less room for empty calories, foods that provide energy without accompanying vitamins, minerals, fiber, or protein. This is the logic behind emphasizing whole foods, vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds, lean proteins. These foods package calories together with the nutrients the body needs. Highly processed foods, by contrast, often provide calories stripped of accompanying nutrition. For those with reduced appetite or difficulty eating, making every bite count becomes essential. This might mean choosing nutrient-dense options, even for snacks, fortifying foods with extra protein or healthy fats, and eating smaller meals more frequently if that works better. The digestive system over time. Digestive function changes with age in ways that affect nutrition. Stomach acid production may decline, affecting absorption of vitamin B12, calcium, and iron. The gut microbiome, the community of bacteria living in the digestive tract, shifts in composition, potentially affecting everything from digestion to immune function to mood. Fiber becomes increasingly important for maintaining digestive regularity and supporting healthy gut bacteria. Adequate fluid intake works alongside fiber to keep the digestive system functioning smoothly. Fermented foods, yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi provide beneficial bacteria that may support microbiome health. Some individuals develop food intolerances with age, often to dairy or wheat. These are genuine physiological changes, not merely preferences. Paying attention to how different foods affect digestion and adjusting accordingly is sensible. Practical patterns, rather than focusing on specific foods to eat or avoid. Many experts suggest focusing on patterns. A pattern of eating that emphasizes plants, includes adequate protein, provides healthy fats, and minimizes highly processed foods appears beneficial across populations. The Mediterranean pattern, which has been extensively studied, exemplifies this approach. It emphasizes vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. It includes fish and seafood regularly, poultry and eggs in moderation, and red meat only occasionally. It uses olive oil as the primary fat. It treats meals as social occasions, eaten slowly and with others. This pattern is associated with better health outcomes across multiple studies, but it is not the only beneficial pattern. Traditional diets from many cultures share similar features. An emphasis on whole foods, plant bases, moderate animal products, and food prepared simply rather than highly processed. Hydration revisited. Water deserves emphasis in any discussion of nutrition. The body is approximately 60% water, and every system depends on adequate hydration. With age, the sensation of thirst becomes less reliable. Many older adults are chronically mildly dehydrated without realizing it. Symptoms of dehydration are often mistaken for other conditions. Fatigue, confusion, headache, constipation. Someone experiencing these might not think to drink more water, and the symptoms can worsen the dehydration. creating a cycle. Simple strategies help. Keeping water accessible. Drinking with meals. Consuming water-rich foods. Setting reminders if needed. And monitoring urine color as a rough guide. For those who find plain water unappealing, herbal teas, infused water, or small amounts of juice diluted with water provide alternatives. Part 6. Stress, rest, and recovery. The stress response system. The body's stress response evolved to handle acute physical threats. When danger appeared, the sympathetic nervous system activated, heart rate increased, blood pressure rose, digestion slowed, glucose was released into the bloodstream. This prepared the body for fight or flight. Once the threat passed, the parasympathetic system took over, promoting rest, digestion, and repair. The system was designed for intermittent activation, periods of high alert followed by periods of recovery. Modern life often subverts this design. Stressors are not acute physical threats, but chronic psychological pressures, financial worries, family concerns, work demands, news consumption. The stress response activates but cannot complete its cycle because the threat does not resolve. The body remains in a state of low-grade activation, never fully returning to rest. Chronic activation and its effects. When stress hormones remain elevated over long periods, they affect nearly every system. The cardiovascular system operates under continuous strain. The immune system becomes dysregulated. Inflammation increases while infection-fighting capacity decreases. Digestion is impaired. Sleep is disrupted. Brain regions involved in memory and emotional regulation are affected. This chronic activation accelerates aspects of aging. Telomeres, the protective caps on chromosomes, shorten more rapidly under chronic stress. Inflammatory processes that contribute to various age-related conditions are amplified. The body's repair systems are less active when the stress response is dominant. The restoration system. Opposing the stress response is the relaxation response, a term coined by Harvard physician Herbert Benson to describe the physiological changes that occurred during practices like meditation, deep breathing, or progressive relaxation. When this system is activated, heart rate decreases, blood pressure drops, breathing slows, and the body enters a state of rest and repair. This is not merely the absence of stress, but an active physiological state. The parasympathetic nervous system takes over. Digestion is promoted. Inflammation is reduced. Cellular repair processes become more active. The body restores what stress has depleted. Cultivating this state is as important as managing stress itself. Practices that trigger the relaxation response can be learned and used regularly. For some, this means meditation or prayer. For others, it means time in nature, listening to music, engaging in a creative hobby, or simply sitting quietly with a cup of tea. The role of rest. Rest extends beyond sleep to include periods of deliberate downtime, times when the body is not actively engaged and the mind is not focused on problems or tasks. These periods allow the default mode network of the brain to become active, a state associated with creativity, self-reflection, and integration of experiences. Modern culture often devalues rest, treating it as wasted time or something to be minimized. But from a physiological perspective, rest is when much of the body's maintenance work occurs. Without adequate rest, the systems that repair damage, clear waste, and restore function cannot keep pace with the demands of daily life. Sleep as foundational rest. Sleep is the most complete form of rest, but it is not simply a single state. It cycles through stages, each serving different functions. Deep sleep is when physical restoration occurs, growth hormone is released, tissues are repaired, the glymphatic system clears waste from the brain, REM sleep is when emotional processing and memory consolidation occur. Sleep quality matters as much as quantity. Fragmented sleep, frequent awakenings, even if brief, disrupts these cycles and reduces restorative function. Someone who sleeps 8 hours with frequent interruptions may wake less refreshed than someone who sleeps 6.5 hours continuously. Creating conditions for quality sleep involves multiple factors. Consistent timing, adequate wind-down time before bed, a cool and dark environment, limited light exposure in the evening, attention to caffeine and alcohol timing, and management of any physical discomforts that disrupt sleep. Part 7. Social connection and belonging. The biological basis of connection. Humans evolved as social creatures. For most of our history, survival depended on belonging to a group that shared food, provided protection, and cooperated in raising young. Being isolated from the group was, in evolutionary terms, dangerous. This history is written into our biology. The brain interprets social connection as safety and social isolation as threat. When we are with trusted others, the stress response calms. When we are isolated, it remains on alert, a state that served our ancestors well, but becomes damaging when chronic. Studies consistently show that socially connected individuals live longer, healthier lives than isolated peers. This is not a small effect. Some analyses suggest that the mortality risk associated with loneliness is comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes per day. Social connection is not merely pleasant, it is protective. The changing social landscape of later years. Later life often brings social changes that can lead to isolation. Retirement removes daily contact with colleagues. Children move away, busy with their own lives and families. Friends may move, become ill, or pass away. Physical limitations can make leaving home more difficult. These changes are not inevitable, but they are common. The person who was socially engaged at 60 may find themselves significantly more isolated at 75. Not through any single event, but through the accumulation of small losses and changes. Recognizing this pattern allows for proactive response. If the social networks built around work will diminish at retirement, what networks can be built to replace them? If friends will inevitably move or become less available, how can new friendships be cultivated? If physical mobility may decrease, what social connections can be maintained from home? Quality over quantity. The number of social connections matters less than their quality. A few deep relationships, people with whom one can share honestly, who provide support when needed, who understand one's history and values, provide more protection than many superficial acquaintances. Deep relationships are built over time through shared experiences and mutual vulnerability. They require investment, time spent together, attention paid, support offered and received. They cannot be manufactured quickly, which is why maintaining existing relationships matters. For those whose deep relationships have been lost, building new ones is possible but requires patience. It begins with regular contact in settings where people can get to know each other gradually. Volunteer activities, classes, groups focused on shared interests, religious or spiritual communities. Over time, some of these acquaintances may deepen into friendships. The different forms of connection. Social connection takes many forms, each valuable. Intimate partnerships provide unique forms of support and understanding. Family connections offer continuity and shared history. Friendships allow choice and shared interests. Community relationships provide a sense of belonging to something larger. For those without access to one form of connection, others can compensate. Someone who has lost a spouse may find deep friendship provides much of what was lost. Someone whose family lives far away may build community relationships that provide daily connection. The key is having some forms of meaningful connection, not necessarily all forms. Even brief positive interactions with strangers, a smile exchanged, a brief conversation with a cashier, a wave to a neighbor provides small boosts to well-being. These micro-connections matter, particularly for those whose deep relationships are limited. They remind us that we are seen, that we belong to a community, that we are not invisible. Giving and receiving. Mutuality matters in relationships. Being only a recipient of support can feel diminishing. Being able to offer support reinforces one's sense of worth and capability. The ideal relationship is one where giving and receiving flow in both directions, balancing over time. For older adults, finding ways to contribute matters. This might mean offering wisdom and experience to younger generations, providing practical help to neighbors, volunteering for causes, or simply being present and listening for friends who need support. The act of giving connects us to others and to our own sense of purpose. Part 8. Purpose and meaning. The need for reason. Humans appear to need a reason to get up in the morning, something that makes the day matter, that orients effort, that provides a sense that one's existence has point. This need does not diminish with age. If anything, it becomes more acute as other sources of meaning, career, raising children, achieving goals, may have receded. Purpose can be understood as the answer to the question, why does what I do matter? The answer need not be grand. It can be as simple as, because my garden feeds my family. Because my grandchildren need to know their history. Because my presence comforts my friend who is grieving. Because I create beauty. And beauty matters. The content of purpose varies enormously between individuals. What matters is that the question has an answer that one can articulate, at least to oneself. Why today's activities are worth doing. Purpose and health. Having a sense of purpose is associated with better health outcomes across multiple studies. Individuals who report strong purpose live longer, experience less disability, maintain cognitive function longer, and report greater well-being than those who lack purpose. Several mechanisms likely explain this. Purpose motivates behavior. People with purpose tend to take better care of themselves, stay more active, remain more engaged. Purpose buffers stress when difficulties arise. Having a reason to persist makes them more manageable. Purpose may even affect biology directly through the nervous and endocrine systems, though the pathways are complex and not fully understood. Finding purpose later in life. For those who have lost a sense of purpose, perhaps after retirement, after children left home, after the death of a spouse, rediscovering it requires reflection and experimentation. What has given meaning in the past? What activities create a sense of flow, where time disappears and one feels fully engaged? What problems in the world or in one's community evoke a desire to help? Sometimes purpose is found by looking backward, returning to interests or values that were set aside during busy middle years. The person who loved painting in youth but stopped may find purpose in picking up the brush again. The person who valued social justice but had no time may find purpose in volunteering for causes. Sometimes purpose is found by looking outward, noticing needs that one might meet. A neighborhood that needs beautification. A literacy program that needs tutors. A political cause that needs advocates. A faith community that needs leaders. Meeting needs connects us to others and gives our efforts meaning. Purpose without production. In a culture that often equates worth with production, it is important to recognize that purpose need not involve doing. Being can be purposeful. Being present for someone who is suffering has purpose. Bearing witness to beauty has purpose. Maintaining dignity in the face of difficulty has purpose. For those whose physical capacities are limited, this recognition matters. The person who can no longer garden, volunteer, or travel may still have purpose in how they meet each day, in the warmth they offer to caregivers, in the example they set of facing limitations with grace, in the prayers they offer or the memories they hold. Integration with other qualities. Purpose connects to every other aspect of vitality. It motivates the physical activity that maintains health. It supports the social engagement that prevents isolation. It provides reason to continue learning, adapting, growing. It makes the effort of maintaining health seem worthwhile. Without purpose, the practices that support health can feel empty. Exercise without reason, nutrition without pleasure, social contact without connection. With purpose, these practices become expressions of something deeper, ways of honoring what matters. Part 9. Environment and context. The spaces we inhabit. Environments shape behavior in ways that are often invisible. The design of a home, the layout of a neighborhood, the availability of services, the safety of public spaces. These factors influence daily choices without conscious awareness. Someone living in a walkable neighborhood with safe sidewalks, nearby parks, and destinations within reach is more likely to walk regularly than someone in a car-dependent area with no sidewalks and nothing within walking distance. Someone living in a home with stairs may maintain leg strength without conscious effort. Someone in a single-level home may need to deliberately seek that challenge. Recognizing environmental influences allows for intentional adjustment. This might mean choosing housing that supports desired activities. It might mean modifying current spaces, adding handrails where helpful, improving lighting to prevent falls, creating comfortable spaces for social connection. It might mean selecting neighborhoods or communities based on how they support vitality. The social environment. The people around us influence us in ways both obvious and subtle. Social norms affect what we consider normal or desirable. If everyone in one's social circle exercises, exercise seems normal. If everyone eats a certain way, that way seems natural. If everyone remains engaged with life, engagement seems expected. This influence can work in both directions. Surrounding oneself with people who model vitality encourages vitality. Conversely, being around those who have withdrawn can make withdrawal seem inevitable. This is not about abandoning friends who are struggling, but about maintaining connections with those who embody the qualities one values. It is also about recognizing that one's own example influences others. Modeling vitality encourages it in those around us. Access to resources. Access to resources shapes possibilities. Those with financial resources can choose housing that supports health, purchase nutritious food, afford medical care, and engage in activities that require payment. Those without such resources face constraints that make maintaining health more difficult. Acknowledging this does not mean resignation. Many aspects of health do not require significant financial resources. Walking is free. Many nutritious foods, beans, lentils, seasonal vegetables, are affordable. Social connection costs nothing. Purpose can be found in activities without expense. But acknowledging differential access matters for maintaining realistic expectations. Some recommendations that are easy for those with resources are genuinely difficult for those without. The goal is to work within one's circumstances, not to compare oneself to those with different circumstances. The natural world. Exposure to nature appears to have specific benefits for health. Time in natural settings reduces stress, improves mood, enhances cognitive function, and may even affect immune function. These benefits occur even with relatively brief exposure, a walk in a park, time sitting in a garden, views of trees from a window. For those who can access natural settings, regular time in nature supports well-being. For those who cannot, bringing nature indoors, houseplants, fresh flowers, views of outside, even images of nature, may provide some of the same benefits. The mechanisms are not fully understood, but likely involve multiple pathways. Reduced sensory load compared to urban environments. Exposure to beneficial microorganisms. Increased physical activity. And simply the beauty that lifts the spirit. Part 10. Integration and application. The interconnection of systems. The aspects of vitality discussed separately are, in lived experience, completely intertwined. Movement affects metabolism, which affects brain function, which affects social engagement, which affects purpose, which affects motivation to move. Each supports the others. Each, when diminished, can pull others down. This interconnection means that small improvements in one area can create ripple effects. Someone who begins walking regularly may sleep better. Better sleep improves mood and cognitive function. Improved mood makes social engagement more appealing. Social engagement provides connection that reinforces purpose. Purpose motivates continued walking. Conversely, decline in one area can cascade. Someone who becomes less socially engaged may lose motivation for physical activity. Reduced activity affects sleep and metabolism. Poor sleep affects cognitive function and mood. Withdrawal deepens. The cascade can happen gradually, almost imperceptibly. Understanding this interconnection suggests that intervention anywhere in the system can be beneficial. Improving any single aspect of vitality supports the whole. One need not address everything at once. Improving one area will tend to improve others over time. Individual variation. The principles discussed here apply broadly, but their application must be individual. What works for one person may not work for another. What is possible given one person's circumstances may not be possible for another. What motivates one person may leave another cold. This is why prescriptive approaches, do this many minutes of this exercise, eat this specific foods, follow this exact schedule, often fail. They ignore the individual variation in bodies, preferences, circumstances, and values that makes each person's path different. A better approach is to understand the principles and then adapt them to one's own situation. If movement is important, what movement is available, appealing, and sustainable for this person? If social connection matters, what forms of connection fit this person's personality and circumstances? If purpose is needed, what sources of meaning resonate with this person's values and history? Starting where you are, for those who have been inactive, socially isolated, or without purpose, the prospect of change can feel overwhelming. The gap between current state and desired state seems too large to bridge. The way forward is to start where you are, not where you wish you were. If you cannot walk for 30 minutes, walk for 5. If you have no close friends, start with brief conversations with acquaintances. If you have no sense of purpose, reflect on what has mattered in the past or experiment with small activities that might matter now. Small changes, consistently maintained, accumulate. 5 minutes of walking becomes 10. Brief conversations become longer. Small experiments reveal what might become purpose. The path is made by walking it, not by planning it perfectly in advance. Consistency over intensity. For most aspects of vitality, consistency matters more than intensity. Walking daily for 20 minutes provides more benefit than walking vigorously for 2 hours once a week. Regular social contact, even brief, maintains connections better than occasional lengthy visits. Consistent sleep and meal timing supports rhythms better than perfect adherence on some days and chaos on others. This is encouraging because consistency is achievable. It does not require heroic effort or perfect conditions. It requires only showing up, day after day, doing what can be done. The cumulative effect of small, consistent actions over months and years is substantial. The role of attitude. How one approaches these practices matters. Approaching movement as a chore to be endured makes it harder to maintain than approaching it as an opportunity to feel capable. Viewing social connection as obligation differs from viewing it as nourishment. Seeing purpose as something to find rather than something to create can lead to waiting rather than acting. Attitudes can be cultivated. Noticing what is good about an activity rather than what is difficult. Focusing on how it feels afterward rather than during. Connecting activities to values rather than seeing them as isolated tasks. These shifts in perspective make consistent action more likely. A closing reflection. The later years of life are not merely an epilogue to what came before. They are a distinct stage with its own possibilities, its own gifts, its own forms of growth. Those who move through this stage with vitality are not lucky or genetically blessed in some exceptional way. They are people who have, often without conscious planning, aligned their lives with principles that support continued flourishing. These principles are not secrets. They are not new discoveries requiring specialized knowledge. They are ancient observations, confirmed by modern research, about how human beings function best, with regular movement, adequate rest, nourishing food, social connection, meaningful activity, and environments that support these things. What makes them difficult is not complexity, but consistency. In a world that constantly pulls toward ease, convenience, and passive consumption, maintaining the practices that support vitality requires intention. It requires choosing, again and again, the slightly more effortful path because it leads somewhere worth going. For those who make these choices, the reward is not immortality or the absence of difficulty. It is the possibility of moving through later years with capacity, with the ability to do what matters, to be with those who matter, to meet each day with something like readiness. It is the possibility of aging not as decline, but as continuation, not as loss, but as transformation. The architecture of vitality is built one day at a time, through choices that seem small in isolation but accumulate into something substantial. It is never too late to begin building. And the building itself, the daily engagement with life, is already part of what we seek. If there is a single thread running through everything we have explored, it is this. The later years are not merely an epilogue to what came before, but a distinct stage with its own possibilities, its own forms of growth, its own quiet dignities. The qualities that support vitality across decades are not secrets locked away in research papers. They are patterns observable in any community, in any culture, in any generation. They ask nothing more than consistent attention and the willingness to begin where we are, with what we have. We would be honored to hear what reflections this exploration has stirred for you, what you have noticed in your own life, or in those around you, about the nature of aging well. If this conversation has been valuable, there are other recordings in this library that may speak to your journey. And if you would like to ensure you do not miss future explorations, consider subscribing so that each new edition finds its way to you. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.